Thank you all so much for coming out. This is so cool. I don't really get out of my house much. I have 3 kids. By the way, love Mothers of MoGraph. What a great organization. Amazing. Yeah. Doing this with kids is not easy, right? Okay, so I first want to say thank you to the sponsors, Autodesk, Maxon, Wacom, and Rive. It's awesome that companies like this, they really do a lot to support the community. They don't just make the tools we use, they actually write checks to have events like this, and it's really awesome. I think motion design is such a crazy, open, welcoming community. It's felt that way ever since I started. And then events like this just remind me why I love it so much. I also want to thank AEPDX for inviting me out. I want to thank Jared from Deep Sky specifically. I spent all day at Deep Sky yesterday. If you are a freelancer, make sure you introduce yourself to them, okay? And they do amazing work. I had so much fun over there. So the talk, let's have a talk, okay, shall we? So I'm gonna pull this a little closer. Here we go. This isn't awkward at all. Okay. So I want to talk about past and the future, okay? And this specific feeling that I get sometimes, okay? Not that feeling, but this feeling is called that Futurey feeling. And I bet a lot of you have had this feeling and maybe there wasn't a name for it yet, okay? So I'm hoping that maybe this sticks and we could have a hashtag or something. So let's talk about the Futurey feeling. So who feels like this is happening right now in our industry? Okay, so here's the thing. Ever since I started in this industry, which was a long time ago, I think technically my first dollar made ever doing something in After Effects was 1999, okay? So quite a while ago. It's kind of felt like this the whole time, if I'm being honest. And I know there's people who've been in this industry for decades in this room. There's people who are just getting into it. I met someone outside that just graduated a year ago. And so I'm telling you, it's kind of always like this, but maybe a little more so now, okay? And here's the thing. If you study history, you can kind of predict what's going to happen in the future with some accuracy, okay? And since I've been around for a while, I'm what we call old or middle-aged, I've seen things, okay? I've seen some of this stuff before, and it's reminding me of what happened at the beginning of my career. So I thought it might be helpful to share some of that with you, and it might reassure you or maybe, hopefully, get you excited about some of the opportunities that are happening right now. So specifically, I'm going to talk about 3 things, okay? And they're 3 huge frickin' deals to me. And my job is basically to teach people how to make a living doing this. I don't just want you to be good at it and make cool stuff. That's great. I want you to make money with it. And all 3 of these, I think, actually are opportunities for that. So let's get into that. And I'm gonna have a few framings here, okay? So this is something I just learned on a podcast. I'm like a podcast addict. And I heard about this and I'm like, that's great. I'm adding it to the presentation. So Jevons paradox, and I'll talk a little bit more about it at the end, is basically this idea that's hundreds of years old, that counterintuitively, when there's something that everybody wants, but it's really hard to make, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of resources to do it, that when technology changes that fact and all of a sudden that thing becomes easier to do, the people that make that thing get really freaked out. Now it's way cheaper to sell the thing I'm doing. But what actually happens every single time is the demand for that thing explodes, okay? And there's a ton of opportunity there. There's tons of examples of this, and I'll get into some of them, okay? So let's start by talking about the first thing that I think is a big deal. But in order to do that, I want to provide some context. So we're going to go back in time, if that's cool, okay? And this is the biggest animated transition I used, and I didn't know how big the screen was, so this might make you puke, okay? Okay. So the year is 2001. So this is me in college, okay? I did have hair under the hat, by the way, back then, believe it or not. Okay, cool. So I went to Boston University, and I got a film and television degree, which is objectively useless, okay? So don't do that. I wouldn't recommend that. And so a lot of people that end up in this field, you're you start out being into movies and stuff, and you're I'm gonna be a filmmaker, right? I'll go get a degree in it, so I'm gonna be good at it. So after my freshman year, I actually went home and I got an internship in Dallas, Texas. I'm from Texas. So I was working at a corporate video company, and I didn't even know what that was. And their biggest client was Mary Kay Cosmetics, if anyone's familiar. Pink Cadillacs, I got to go to the Mary Kay convention, which was terrifying. Anyway, but while I'm there, I'm using these at the time, cutting edge digital beta cameras. And they had an Avid, and I got to sit next to the editor and learn about the Avid. They had a Media 100 that no one knew how to use, and I read the manual and I started using it. And then I got good enough at it where they were paying me to do client work for them as part of my internship. So it was amazing. I go back to college, and it's my sophomore year, and that's when we could actually make films. And so I'm very cocky because I have 2 months of experience now. Like I know how this works, okay? So I'm like, okay, cool, give me a camera, let's go. And we go into the film class and they're like, here's your camera. So who knows what this is? Has anyone ever used one of these? Okay, this is called a Bolex, okay? And you have to load the film into it literally in a black bag so that the light doesn't hit it, so you can't see it. You have to do it by feel. And then once you do that, you crank the thing like a wind-up toy, and when you finish, you hold the shutter and you get like maybe 30 seconds to shoot this 8mm film. Now, I had just used real cameras that you could plug into a monitor and actually like see what you're shooting. And I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, why am I shooting on this? And I was told very matter-of-factly by the professor that, and later on in my career, people would say this about film. Well, the film looks better, and this is what clients want. And if you want that quality, you have to learn to do it this way, even though it's 1,000 times as difficult and tedious. Okay, fine. So I shot on the Bolex. Now it's time to edit the thing. And I'm like, okay, somehow this will get into an Avid, because I literally was just using Avids over the summer. That's what I'm going to be using if I get a job in this. This is what was in the editing lab. So who's used one of these? I bet not very many people. Yeah, okay, a few. So this is called a Steenbeck, and I don't mean to crap on the thing. I mean, like in 1930, this was like cutting edge, okay? And like Apocalypse Now was cut on something like this. So you can obviously make great work on it, right? It's just a tool. The tool isn't what makes the film great. But if you've never used one, you literally have to cut the film, like physically cut it, tape it together. You hang the rest of your film up on this little rack, and it's ridiculous. And then you're like, oh, I wish I had 2 extra frames on that cut. So you've got to go find the film, cut those 2 frames and tape it together. And don't get me started on like how you do audio on this. Like it's magnetic tape. You can't see a waveform. It's insane. And like this was a thing back then. It was. And I would say, why are we learning this? No one's going to pay me to do this. Why am I learning this? Well, because it forces you to focus on the craft of the edit. And there was all these excuses made. And it just seemed ridiculous to me. And literally in the next room were 4 of these. These were very cutting edge back then. 4 Avids. And they used to be very expensive. And even today, I haven't used an Avid in a while, but like back then, to say they had UX was like being very, very kind. It was so clunky to use. But it was like an actual editing system, but sophomores couldn't use it. So I'm like stuck on this Steenbeck. Now, that same year, I got another internship at a post house in Boston, and I went on the Wayback Machine and I actually found their website from when I was interning there. And they were still talking about their amazing linear online suite. Now, if you don't know that word online, we don't really talk that way anymore, but basically you would edit on an Avid, and then you'd go into this room with millions of dollars of equipment, and one shot at a time, you would play this tape into this tape. Then you'd grab the other tape with the other shot, and then if you needed a graphic, you'd run it through the Chiron machine. It was insane. And it took forever, and like they had smokes and they had fires, it was sort of like a precursor to flame. And they weren't using it for that because, well, the quality of this is better. The Chiron machine, the pixels are so crisp. And they would say things like this to me. So I was kind of confused. And then one day, this happened. Okay? So I'm like, wait a minute. I have a Mac in my dorm room, and the student version of this was $300, and I bought it. And I'm like, wait, I can do all of this in my frickin' room? This is way better, okay? So this is the first time that I was sort of had this futury feeling. I was like, wait a minute. There's this old way of doing stuff, and there's this new way, and no one wants to do the new way. Why? I don't understand. So this is kind of me butting up against that thing where it's like you've been doing it this way for 20 years, and you're so good at it, and it was so hard to get good at it, you don't want it to change, right? Like on one side, you have really, really expensive equipment. And on the other side, you have like a cracked version of After Effects, right? And Final Cut Pro, and you could buy these like cheaper capture cards. You could do uncompressed video even back then. And the problem with things being really expensive and time consuming and hard, it's not just that they're expensive, it's that there's less of them, right? Like if I wanted back then, it's easier now, but back then, if I wanted to like be a flame artist, I needed a flame. And they were so expensive, there was like 10 of them in Boston, and they were in use all the time. How the hell am I gonna learn it, right? It was really hard. After Effects worked on my computer in my dorm room. And I'm sitting there with a beer and some hair. It was, if I'm being honest, it was already receding at the time. But like, I'm thinking to myself, why would you not do this, okay? So this is why. Now I'm waiting for someone to get the pun. I'll help you out in a minute. Seth gets it. Okay, cool. Yeah, the paradigm needed to change. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. Okay, so this happens all the time. There's like a way of doing things, and you invest time and effort and education and plugins and all these things, and then this new thing comes along that's like, oh, the old way is just not necessary anymore. Like, you don't have to do it that way. You could just stop right now and do it this new way. It's cheaper, faster, better. But it takes time. It always takes time for that for some reason. So what happened? Okay, so a few years into my career, post houses started just shutting down, like ones that had been there forever that were never going away. And it's crazy. I mean, this just happened. The mill just shut down. They're like, these companies that you think are never going away, sometimes they do, right? And so it occurred to me that that was part of it, okay? Like, there's always multiple reasons. There's recessions, there's things like that. But the new studios that sprung up, all of them were on Final Cut Pro. All of them. The desktop editing revolution, they called it back then, okay? And I saw it, but I didn't have enough experience to understand why I was the only one seeming to notice this, right? And of course, I wasn't the only one, but all of the legacy shops I worked for, a lot of them didn't get it, right? Okay, so now we're gonna come back to the future, okay? And you're gonna like this. I'm trying to trigger some people in this room. We didn't come far enough, okay? We haven't come all the way back to the future yet. I used to use Cinema 4D every day back when I was running a studio in Boston. I'm very familiar with this. Okay, cool. So the first time I saw GPU renderers, I saw an Octane tutorial. I'm like, oh my God, we're done looking at render buckets. This is great. I got the Futurey feeling, okay? And that was a huge revolution in 3D, and that's kind of like the state of the art now, right? Well, now we also have this. So this is a short film that our VP of marketing, Aaron Rabinowitz, the one and only, he made this in his spare time. He made this all by himself last year. He learned Unreal, and a year later made this. And there's like volumetric effects, and there's character rigs, and there's fake UI, and there's compositing, and there's crazy camera moves, and motion blur, and lens flare, like everything, right? And I was like, Aaron, could you make this like the old way? Like if you had to look at render buckets, or like even with a GPU renderer. And it's like, yeah, you can obviously make this any way you want. But to render this with render buckets would be ridiculous. To render it even with a GPU renderer, you'd probably want a render farm. It would take a long time. But with real-time 3D render engines, this becomes possible, right? It's not impossible because you can't do it. It's because it's too expensive. It takes too long. Now it's possible. Okay, so that's going to be a recurring theme here. I think this is a really big deal. So the Academy Awards are in a few nights, and this film is up for Best Animated Picture, and it's already won the Golden Globe for that award, and it beat out Disney. This film was rendered on a real-time render engine. So Blender ships with 2 render engines. It ships with Cycles, which is like a traditional sort of path tracing thing, and then it ships with Eevee, which is a real-time render engine. And so they sort of tailored the look of the film to fit in with Eevee. And for $3.8 million, which is essentially zero for a feature-length film, you can round it down if you want, okay? Less than 50 people, I heard maybe 40 people, they completed this, and the director rendered it on his home PC. There was no render farm, okay? And it might win Best Animated Picture in a couple days. And if it does, I think that's gonna be a really big deal in animation. So was it possible for a small team for $0, essentially, right, to make a feature-length animated film that wins an Oscar? Well, yeah, of course it was, but it might have taken years. Maybe like, they would have been living on ramen noodles. I don't know. But this real-time thing made this possible. And it's actually interesting. This morning, E.J. Hassenfratz, who I'm sure a bunch of you are familiar with, he's our 3D creative director. He interviewed the director of this film for our podcast, so that's going to be coming out soon. So again, like, you could make a film like this any way you want, but it's actually kind of impossible if you have a budget and a deadline, right? And now that kind of opens up. Here's another crazy thing. So we're in Portland. I'm sure there's some fish heads out there, okay? So here's the thing about Fish. I mean, you guys know this, right? It is Portland, but for anyone who doesn't, Fish is a jam band, okay? What that means, I'm told, because I don't listen to jam bands, but what I'm told is that they don't play the same set ever. They frankly don't play the same song ever, because they're playing a song and then in the middle they kind of like wink at each other, and then like the drummer pulls out a vacuum cleaner and then they're just like jamming, right? And so if you're doing concert visuals for them, how do you do that? How do you make things sync up to what the band's doing? Because, the two sort of traditional ways of doing that are the band is playing to like a click track. So they play the same show every night, and then you kind of pre-render a whole thing and you just play it. And as long as the band stays in sync, it all syncs up. Or you're rendering out a bunch of clips and you have sort of like a video jockey, as they're called, a VJ, kind of, triggering clips and maybe some effects on top of them and stuff like that. What Fish did, because this was at the Sphere in Vegas, right? So they wanted something really big and cool. They hired Moment Factory, and they built a fully real-time 3D visualization that they could control as the band played. And they could control light changes, camera changes, windows opening up that they then fed a video signal into, trees blooming, fireworks, everything. Again, this is a thing that wasn't really possible before you had these really powerful real-time 3D engines. And I mean, you've had real-time 3D before, but it's always been like kind of locked behind VizRT or Chiron, these really kind of expensive things. And Unreal kind of unlocks this, right? And so you can now do things you literally couldn't do before. This is a cool example. So Cart and Horse, so we just interviewed them for our podcast. They're two guys out of Detroit. And they've done a couple of things that I think are really cool. One is they put on a virtual production shoot for like a few $1,000s, which is nuts, okay? And they got their friends to help out, and they built all these environments, and they went and they did a virtual production shoot. And what they're doing now is they're going around and they're showing production companies that this is possible. And the thing about production companies is that they're used to going out and doing real shoots, like in real places. And I'm sure Jared can attest, that's very freaking expensive, super expensive. And if you have an amazing crew and you get really lucky with the weather, maybe you get 2 or 3 locations a day, probably 2, probably the maximum, right? They shot like 8 locations in a day with this. Outside, inside, lighting changes, right? And so to me, the cool thing about this, you're all familiar with virtual production. The Mandalorian's a thing and we all kind of know about it. But the opportunity I see is that you can go to production companies who are used to spending like, maybe $100,000 for like a big shoot day, and you can get 2 locations. Now for the same money, you can get 8 locations. And the DP can literally say like, move that tree over, and you just do it, right? So again, this is a thing that wasn't possible. Here's another thing that was also sort of possible, but not really, was real-time client sessions in 3D. So I used to do a lot of these when I was an editor. Like that was kind of the standard in Boston. They'd come to sit on the couch, you get Starbucks, right? They'd heckle you. I would do that in After Effects sometimes too, which is kind of scary. I would never do it in 3D, right? Because like, watch these render buckets for a bit. Okay, you want me to change something? Like, that doesn't work, right? And with GPU renderers, it's better, but they're still looking at something kind of approximating the final result. So with real time, they're looking at the final result essentially, right? And like make the camera a little faster, click, watch it, done, right? So you can actually get approvals really, really quick. And I think this is cool because I haven't heard of lots of 3D artists doing this yet. So I think this is kind of a neat differentiator. Anyone out there who's, a little more extroverted, not afraid to like do a real-time session with a client. I think this is actually like a really cool thing you can offer clients. Hey, we can do this 3D thing for you. We can hop on a Zoom call. You can come sit on the couch and I'll order you Starbucks. You have to do that, by the way. That's not optional. And they can approve it right there. It's way, way faster. This is an amazing example. So this is an artist named Ryan Corneal. And if you follow him on social media, he's got like dozens of these. So these are real-time Muppets. And they're built and rigged in Unreal, and he's using a VR controller, like a little hand puppet thing. So he can basically just act these things out, and there's no rendering. He's just like, that looks cool, and basically just like record that, right? I mean, that's basically what he's doing. And these things are amazing, right? And I reached out to him, and I told him I was giving this talk, and I was like, dude, tell me a little bit more about it. And he's like, dude, it's crazy. I started doing these, and like this opportunity popped up. And so now he's got like some people that came in, and now they're making like a YouTube series of these things, right? And if you think about what it would have taken to do that without a real-time 3D engine, of course you could do it. You could literally physically build the puppets, or you could like model and rig them and then like maybe capture the keyframes and then apply it to the rig and then render it and see if you like it. Or you can literally just act the thing out, right? So this is kind of a new thing that like, again, it wasn't impossible totally, but within a budget, within a deadline, this wasn't really possible. The obvious thing everyone thinks of, in motion design anyway, with real-time 3D is like, how do we do real-time broadcast graphics? Because if you ever go to NAB in Vegas and you see the size of VizRT's booth, you will faint. That company is printing money, okay? And they're a real-time sort of engine for broadcast graphics. So Too Fresh did the Super Bowl package last year, okay? And they did part of it in Unreal. And they built an entire Las Vegas city that they could just fly through and do animations in real time. And it could be live in the broadcast if they wanted. That's sick, okay? That's the technical term for this. Here's another example of that. Capacity, who obviously they're known for like their amazing broadcast packages. They did this Rocket League package for a live event. So a lot of this stuff was like on multiple screens in an actual stadium. And then on top of that, it was being live streamed. And all of this is built in Unreal and rigged up to controls. And you can use a physical controller if you want, or just click and just change everything in real time. And that's a huge opportunity. I think that's the obvious one. I think the other ones are less obvious and maybe more interesting. But I looked up, I tried to find out, like, what is the full buy-in for like a VizRT system, right? It ain't cheap. It just ain't. It just ain't, okay? And so the key point, my key point with all this is that this real-time 3D thing, I know everyone's kind of aware it's kind of a big deal, but like, I'm like, inside, I'm like, why isn't everyone like freaking out about this? Like you can do stuff that you literally couldn't do. And the coolest thing about everything I'm going to talk about tonight is clients don't know this yet. Like some of them do, but not all of them. And if you know it and they don't know it, that's called an opportunity, right? If you're an entrepreneur, that's like, I mean, that is a big opportunity. And there's a lot of this right now, okay? So doing things the old way, like we're still going to be doing things like the old-fashioned way, right? Like like GPU renders are old-fashioned now. They're not. And there's still a lot of development that needs to happen to make this really work well. But I think in 5 to 10 years, like, why would you not be rendering in real time if you could? It opens up so many possibilities. Okay, so now we're gonna go back in time again. We're gonna talk about the second thing. So just to set the stage, okay, it's 2007, Shrek the Third's out, okay? I looked up some of the songs that were big back then. So Hey There, Delilah, Rihanna's Umbrella, which she pronounces Umbrella, and Linkin Park, What I've Done, okay? Anybody? Huh? I'm seeing Linkin Park in like a month and a half, so I'm excited. Okay, so in 2007, I was obsessed with this thing, okay? So high definition television was just starting to catch on. It was kind of a neat time for me. And I'm an early adopter, I always have been. So I bought one of the first HD TVs. I think it was 720p. I don't even think it was 1080p. And you really couldn't watch anything high definition very easily. You had to like get rabbit ears, like literally old school, because I think networks were required to broadcast in HD at that point. So you could watch like 5 channels. And then I was like, I want to watch movies in high def. And the only way to do it was to buy one of these. This is a Blu-ray player. They were like $500 or $600 when they came out, and the discs were really expensive, and it was like physical media. But I'm an early adopter, and I was going to do it, but it was expensive, and I was like, should I do it? And I waited a little bit, and then all of a sudden one day this happened. Okay? So, I mean, there are some young people in here. I saw you. So you may not know that Netflix used to mail you DVDs in the mail. Okay, you'd get on their website, you'd literally set up a queue of what you wanted to watch. They'd mail you a disc, you'd get it in this nice red envelope, you'd play it, and then you'd send it back, and when they got it back, they'd send you the next one. That's what they did, and everyone loved it. It was a big deal. And it literally killed Blockbuster Video. And so then, one day, they're like, what if there's this thing called the internet, and people are starting to get high-speed internet, and it's getting faster. What if we just like streamed the movie over the internet? That's a crazy idea. And so I was like really excited, and I went on and I watched the Enron documentary, which is very depressing. It was the first movie I ever streamed. And I remember like going to the site and clicking it, and it just played. And it was like, what? And then I stopped it and I clicked another one, and that just played. And I know it sounds ridiculous in 2025 to be impressed by that, but like you cannot imagine how groundbreaking that was when that happened, okay? And so what did Joey do? Joey did not buy a Blu-ray player. It was very, very painful because I had that Futurey feeling again. I was like, oh, physical media is dead. We just don't need it anymore. This is so much better. Why on earth would you ever buy a physical thing made of atoms? It's stupid. And of course, it took a while, right? So this is why I sacrificed, because it probably took another 2 or 3 years really before Netflix really went all in on this, right? It did take a while, but of course, streaming is now a $750 billion industry. And nobody buys physical media unless it's like vinyl, you know, because it's like cool looking. All right. So this is how I felt. Okay. I felt very Nostradamus-y. And I've had this feeling again. Recently, I've had a very strong feeling. Okay. A very strong Futurey feeling. And I have to say, before I show this next slide, I did not know who the sponsors were before I set up this slide because it's going to seem very self-serving. But so if you're doing animation for an app, or a website, which is an enormous freaking market, okay? This is still how most companies do it. You prototype the animation, maybe in After Effects or ProtoPie or one of these like animation tools, And then there's like this translation step that has to happen. So what you're seeing on that middle screen there, that's called Inspector Spacetime. It's a plugin that Adam Plouffe of BattleAxe made while he worked at Google. And it translates your After Effects keyframes into milliseconds and the Bezier handle values. And it spits out what's called a JSON file. And then you give that to the developer and they do their code thing. And then you look at what it turns into and you're like, oh, it's not quite right, actually. Can you change that? And they're like, change what? And like, and then you finally get it the way you want. And then you're like, okay, cool. Actually, we need to change one thing. Now you got to do the whole thing over. It's ridiculous, okay? And I've done this. Like, it's very painful, and this is how Google's doing it right now. Like, we had 2 artists from Google on a live stream last year, and they explained this is still how they do it, okay? So here's the thing. Here's the thing, people. That problem is completely solved, okay? Like, I'm serious. I gush about Rive a lot. Oh, you're probably sick of hearing about it. I know the Rive guys aren't, but maybe some of you are. You don't understand what a big deal this is, okay? When you go from working with marketing budgets to product budgets, right? That's a different ball game. There's way more of that than you could possibly imagine. And the process for a motion designer to work on that was so clunky until this tool arrived. And the problem is solved. So here's a few examples. So Rive talks about Duolingo a lot because they were like early adopters. They saw the potential very, very early and they went all in. They acquired Gunner and their other studio, Hobbs, because they're like, we have Rive now. We're going to buy motion design studios. And so all of the characters that you see when you use Duolingo, those are animated in Rive. And this is kind of a new thing. So they have this thing called FaceTime where you can FaceTime an animated character, okay? And you can see on the little panel, it's rigged in Rive. All the little micro animations, the blinks and the little swivels and stuff like that, all the lip shapes and the phonemes and the way that mouth animates, all done in Rive. And so you know exactly what it's going to look like. You hand that off to a developer and they just do their developer thing. So all the tricky stuff of like, taking the audio and transcribing it and using AI to figure out what it should say and saying it in the right language, all those things, and then triggering the right mouth shape at the right time, the developer figures that stuff out, okay? You don't have to. The motion designer makes the motion design and then just hands it off. I don't think this would be possible without Rive. I think it is technically possible. It would be so hard to do that it just wouldn't be done, okay? Recurring theme. So if you follow Rive, if you follow the CEO, Guido, he reposts literally everything that anyone says about Rive. I think he's got like an alert set up or something, okay? And there's a lot of really cool stuff. But what's happening right now is the UI and UX world, like those designers, they got this really quick. And so they're the ones doing, I think, the most stuff right now. There's not a ton, there's some motion designers doing stuff with this, but it's still like a lot of UI, UX-y kind of stuff. And it looks beautiful. It's amazing, right? But I think there's some opportunities for motion designers here, okay? So here's a weird one. Really weird, okay? So look, how many people have had to animate something at 16 by 9 and then by 9:16? Right? Okay. So this is like, yeah, exactly. Okay. You don't have to clap for that. You can boo if you want. Boo. Okay. So here's the thing. UI and UX, that world has figured this out already. It's called responsive design and Webflow and Figma and Framer and all these tools, they already have that figured out. Okay. In motion design, we haven't quite figured it out yet. In After Effects, there's like some kind of clunky expressions you can write and some tools that maybe help you kind of do it. Rive has it built in. So you can literally like animate whatever you want, and then you can set design rules. That's how responsive design works. You set rules. You say like, this should take up 30% of the screen, and this should take up 70%. But if the screen size shifts and all of a sudden it's taller than it is wide, flop that, right? And you set all those rules up and you test it, and then you ship it. And whatever screen the thing plays on, it just plays the way you want, right? Would that be helpful? Right? I was talking with a company the other day and they're like, yeah, we do Google display ads and we have to deliver like 15 different sizes and it sucks because we have to design them all. And I'm like, have you tried Rive? It just does it, right? So I think this is a huge deal for anyone, especially if you're doing like, live events, conferences, anything where you're not entirely sure what the screen's actually gonna be. This is huge. And for web design, this is massive. This entire thing was built in Rive, the entire website. And so the thing about websites is you have no idea what size the browser is going to be, so you have to use these rules, right? And Google will penalize you if you don't. And so you can very quickly and easily just sort of like set it up to like scale things down and move things apart and then center it when it gets too small if it's like on a phone. And you just do this all, and then literally there's no code. You just hand it off to someone and they just play it and use it. It's crazy. So this website made the rounds on all the design blogs lately. This is Dropbox's new brand guidelines. And they made this really cool site, super interactive. And so they're using a combination of Webflow, which is like the world's most popular website builder, and they have very rudimentary animation tools in there. But a lot of this is Rive. And all the web designers were like, holy crap, that's so cool, how'd you do it? And here's the thing, if Dropbox is doing this, they're probably spending a lot of money on this, right? And what tends to happen is you get early adopters, you get the Duolingos, you get the Dropboxes, and then everyone else starts to follow along. And there's like not that many people who know how to do this yet. So that's why I think this is a huge opportunity. Now, this is a really cool one. You guys are gonna like this one, okay? So this is from Territory Studios. They're known for fake UI. That's kind of like one of their things they're really good at. And so the way you would normally do that is you'd shoot something like an empty screen, and then you'd track it, and then you'd composite the screen on, and then if there's like a finger in front of the phone, you gotta put some light, on that with compositing, and you got a roto, and it's like a pain in the butt, right? And it's really hard for DPs because they're shooting something that doesn't actually look like the final thing, so they're kind of guessing like where they should focus and stuff. And so what Territory did was they built fake UIs and turned them into Rive files. And then you just put it on the screen, and the actor just uses it. And because you can control everything, you can make a keyboard that someone's typing on, but it doesn't matter what key you push. It types the correct thing in the right timing, and then a little chat bubble moves up, and there's light on your finger because you're actually using a screen that's lit. And so they were telling me, we interviewed them about this, it's on our channel. They were telling me that like directors and DPs absolutely love this, and actors love this. It's just a way better way to do a scene that requires something like this. Again, could you do this before Rive? Yeah, technically you could. You could hire a developer and like make custom things to do this, and then on set you want to change something. Well, it's really hard because we need a developer like recompile this thing. It's so trivially easy to do this now. And I think, again, this kind of like gets into that intersection of post-production and production where there's a lot of budget in production. And so even if budget comes out of post-production, because you're using Rive for this, it goes into production, but you still need motion designers to do this stuff, right? So I think this is really cool. This is what it looks like now, okay? And you're like some of the few people in the world that understand this because I'm screaming it at you, okay? Like you build the thing and you ship it, and that's it. There's no translation. That's freaking it, okay? So this is Futurey, okay? The same way that like I recognize we don't need physical media anymore, streaming's here. I'm like, we don't need this old way anymore. And I've said this, and I feel kind of bad saying it because Lottie is an amazing tool. It's helped a lot of people. It's really great. There's still some use cases for it, for sure. In 10 years, I don't think we'll need it, right? I think this is like the new way. So let's talk about the third thing. All of you know what it's going to be, okay? Any guesses? Yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, very obvious, okay. So first we're going to go back to 1993. I was 12. Okay, so the songs, by the way. I Will Always Love You. Any Whitney Houston fans? Okay. Whoomp, There It Is. Nothing But a G Thing. Okay, cool. All right, so in the before times, if you wanted to do special effects in a movie, like Jason and the Argonauts, you want some skeletons to be attacking, well, you got to do stop motion, okay? Or in Star Wars, they're making miniatures and then doing motion control shots. And in Tron, they're using these optical processes to get these like glowing suits. They actually had some rudimentary CG in it, but I'm talking really like TI-83 calculator level of CG. And then, The Thing, you got these amazing practical effects, never-ending story, best movie ever made, maybe, next to Labyrinth. Lots of like practical effects. So these movies are awesome, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with a movie. It's just the process of doing it is really slow, really time-consuming. And so one day along comes this guy, okay? I didn't even put his name up there because I hope everyone recognizes him. He was making a movie about dinosaurs, okay? He may have seen it. And right around that time, there was this movie called Young Sherlock Holmes, which I don't know, probably you guys haven't seen that one. It wasn't great, but it had the first ever fully CG character that was like integrated into live action shot, this stained glass knight, and it holds up surprisingly well, to be honest. And so Phil Tippett, who is like this legendary VFX supervisor, VFX artist, he worked on Star Wars and all these great movies, he saw this and he's like, whoa, there's kind of some potential here. And Phil Tippett is like the miniature guy and practical effects, and he's like, like pioneering optical effects and stuff on Star Wars. And he sees this, he's like, this is interesting. What an interesting new tool that I can use in my palette. And so when they were making Jurassic Park, they tried doing stop motion dinosaurs, and there's like tests you can find on YouTube and stuff. They're really kind of cute. They ended up going with CG when no one thought it was possible. And if you look at this scene, first of all, it holds up ridiculously well. But also think about what this scene would look like with stop motion dinosaurs. It would not have this impact. You couldn't do this. You couldn't make this scene without CG. Well, technically you could. You could do stop motion and have, stop motion animators animating like dozens of dinosaurs and shoot it in an interesting way like Aardman does where you fake motion blur and stuff. And maybe you could get something like this. No, it wouldn't have happened. It'd be impossible. And then CG makes it possible. And that line is from the movie, but it's actually from Phil Tippett. So this is a cool story. When he saw the first CG tests of dinosaurs that they were doing, he said, wow, I think I've just become extinct. And Spielberg thought that was such a cool line. He put it in the movie. And we'll talk about if Phil Tippett went extinct. At the same time, there was this company called Pixar, and they were experimenting with CG for fully animated movies. So this is from 1988, believe it or not. This is Tin Toy. Okay, what do you think? Pretty good. What shader is that? What grayscale gorilla shader is that? Okay, so obviously everyone sees this and like, this is not watchable. Okay, like I can't show my kids this. But then of course, 1995, they released Toy Story, and the rest is history, right? So what happened? Again, CG is in everything, literally everything, right? There's not a show that you watch that doesn't have CG in it. Are there more shows now than there were back then or less? There's way more. So Jevons paradox in action once again. And let's go back to Phil Tippett. He is still gainfully employed, right? He actually was the VFX supervisor on Alien Romulus, which used CG, practical effects, and stop motion. So he just has more tools now to work with. That other frame is from Over the Moon, which was directed by Glenn Keane, who's one of like the most world-renowned 2D animators in history, like legendary Disney animator. And he still does 2D animation. There's less commercial demand for that, but there's some, and he does like a lot of like personal projects. But he's directed CG films now. It's another tool for him to like tell stories, and you can tell when he directs something, right? Like a good director, you can really like feel their hand over every frame. So I want to remind everybody of this before I go too much further. CG is a tool. You have to have taste. You have to have creativity. You have to have something interesting to say, or it's just going to fall flat. And there's lots of examples of that. Like Jurassic Park was done like with essentially like a Game Boy. Like, I mean, like compared to the power we have now and the renderers and like all the asset packs and textures and tools we have, right? But it still holds up because you had some of the best artists in the world and one of the best directors who's ever lived creating it, and then you've got like The Mummy or something like that, right? So this is a chart of the animation market, okay? So I tried to do some homework. So in 1990, the estimate was $50 billion. It's currently $400 billion. And it's estimated to grow. It's been growing about 8 to 10% a year ever since the 90s, okay? So Jevons paradox, this thing that's really hard to do, which makes it rare and expensive, all of a sudden gets a lot easier to do and quicker. What happens? Way more of it, right? Way more work for everybody, for the ones that adapt. Very important, okay? So this brings us to, wait for it, brace, trigger warning. Yeah, right, there it is. Okay, so let me try this with a soft touch. So, okay, so AI, you've heard of it, okay? So here's the thing about AI, okay? So when it first started happening, right, like, I don't know, 2 years ago, like Midjourney comes out, and I'm like, holy crap, how is that even possible? Should I be worried? I don't know. Everyone around me is freaking out, like, So I hear a lot of this. Anytime we mention AI at School of Motion, like if you watch Motion Mondays videos and I mention AI, go read the comments, okay? A lot of people don't like it for some reason, okay? And I hear stuff like this. It's soulless, it looks fake, you don't get the control you need, all that kind of stuff. Here's the problem. Problem is, I remember the last time I heard people say that about something, and I remember how it turned out, okay? So I have a natural skepticism when I hear this. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't look good, but it does not look good because it's new. It does not look good because what you're looking at is like a non-professional artist, someone just like playing around and they just put it on the internet and it went viral for some reason. And you think that that's what represents the work you can do with this? Like, I don't know, right? I will tell you, historically, every time I've heard this, it hasn't been true once, not one time. And the people that yell this eventually either get on board or, they leave the industry. Like this is the hard part in talking about AI. is we all know it's changing stuff. We don't know what yet, right? It's still pretty new. But I just want to reiterate that like I've literally never heard this be right, ever. And the people saying that, I don't know if they've seen this. This is a fully AI generated video. Like none of this was shot. Yeah, whoa. Thank you. So Jesus Plaza, he's a professional filmmaker, editor, a talented person who decided to use Google VO2 to try and make like a spec spot. It's really good, right? Like if you were hired by an ad agency to do a Rip-O-Matic, does anyone know what a Rip-O-Matic is, or is that like aging myself? Okay, a Rip-O-Matic, just if you don't know, is an agency wants to pitch one of their accounts like a commercial. And so they're like, how do we kind of sell the idea to them? You go out and you get clips from movies and other commercials and TV shows and you rip stuff off YouTube and then you edit something that's kind of in that same vein and maybe you color correct it and you add some music and stuff. The hardest part of that is finding the footage, by far. Takes the longest time. Editing those things is usually not that hard. So what happens when the editor who normally is beholden to the footage they're given is no longer beholden to the footage they're given? They can have an idea and get that shot. That's what this is, right? And if you think about as a professional person who's being paid money to produce something, isn't this a pretty good tool to have in your tool belt? Now, if Jesus wasn't talented and didn't have good ideas and didn't know what a good shot is and didn't know how to color grade and stuff, this would look like crap. And you've all seen lots of AI crap, right? But this is pretty good. I don't know. And so the way that I look at AI and really all of these tools is like, okay, like I try to think from first principles sometimes. What's my job? What's my job as an artist, right? My job is someone's going to give me money to solve a business problem for them, right? They don't need a commercial. They have a business problem that needs to be solved. I think a commercial could do that for them. And so they give me money and I go, okay, I have this idea. It's in my mind. You can't see it. No one else can see it. Only I can, right? And my job is now to turn that into pixels. And I know that's kind of a gross way of describing motion design, but like if you get right down to it, that's one way of looking at it. So you have many paths you could take to doing that. I could like get a bunch of pencils and I could draw every single frame and take a picture of it and then like sequence that together in a timeline. I could do that. Maybe it would come out great if I'm Glenn Keane. But I also could use the most cutting edge tools and do it really fast and have more ability to like respond to client revisions and be able to like listen to them and take their ideas and try it and see. Which route are you gonna take really depends on how willing you are to like try the new thing, okay? And AI really, as much as I hate to admit it, it really does speed up a lot of things. Now you may have noticed, those with keen eyesight, that there's these two little devil characters that have been kind of like lurking on a bunch of these slides. So let me talk about them. So this is budget and deadline, okay? Merchandise available. Okay, so these two things plague every job we do. Okay, like there's no, even personal projects, right? Do you want to spend money on it? How much time are you willing to dedicate to it? There's always a budget and a deadline, even if there isn't. So let's say, here's an example, okay? Just on the spot, making this up. So for example, let's say you're giving a talk in Portland and you want an image of two cute Pixar-esque devil characters to represent budget and deadline. What are your options? Okay, so one option is I hire Deep Sky to like, use one of their amazing artists to like make this for me, okay? And I haven't asked Jared how much, he'd probably give me a discount because we're friends now, but tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, it would take like a month. Like I'd have to go back and forth on concepts and then approve that, and then they got to do the geometry and the texturing. I mean, it would take a long time and it would cost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. For one slide, I'm not paying that. So that makes it actually impossible. Okay, option B is I try to make this myself. Like I know Cinema 4D, pretty good at it, but this isn't my wheelhouse, okay? It would be very hard for me to make anything approaching this level. Or I could try to find a stock image, right, which I did, and turns out this particular stock image doesn't exist, right? Like this is kind of a weird idea, so this doesn't exist. So like before AI, this is impossible. That stupid image up there, okay? Impossible, couldn't exist, it just wouldn't. Or I used Midjourney in Photoshop and took like 5 minutes, okay? And it added 0.5% of cuteness to this presentation. But all it is a tool, right? If I didn't have this idea, if I didn't think this was funny and cute, then it just wouldn't exist, but it couldn't have existed before. All right, I'm gonna keep hammering that home. Here's a really stupid example. So I had to give like an end of the year talk to the school motion team last year. It's just like one of those like rah-rah things. Hey, we did great this year and here's how we're doing. And I thought it'd be more fun, because those can be boring, if I made garbage pail kids of all of them. Okay, so let's say this is 5 years ago and I want to do this. How do I get garbage pail kids made of every single one of my team? I could hire an illustrator. And it's funny because last night there was an illustrator I was talking to, and I told him about this, and he's like, yeah, probably $10,000 to $20,000 to get 18 of these at this level of detail. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I estimated. So that's good. So that's option A. Option B is I try to draw these myself, and I promise you that's not really an option, okay? So this doesn't exist, or it does. This was mid-journey in like 2 days, and there's a lot of Photoshop to clean up the weird, extra fingers, and then I'd want like a tooth knocked out, and I'd go in there and manually do that. You got to lay the cards out. I mean, obviously, there's like a lot of work that actually goes into it, even when you're using AI. Even that crazy spec commercial I just showed you guys, like that still took a lot of work, and it took a lot of ideas and trial and error and finding things, right? But it makes a thing possible that wasn't. Here's a much cooler example. So Swarovski Studio in Chicago, shout. So they have this Instagram channel called Meet the Scrimps, and if you go to it, you'll see hundreds of these. They release one every day. They've gotten tens of thousands of followers, and it's like celebrities and TV characters and politicians and members of their staff, and these are so adorable and awesome. I think it's, I don't know, maybe like a viral marketing thing they're trying to do, or like just like a cool experiment. Again, how would you do this without using Midjourney or something like that? You'd have to fabricate these things, or you'd have to like make them in 3D, or somehow be really good at Photoshop. Like it would just take too long. It wouldn't work. This doesn't exist without these tools, okay? And I don't know, that's kind of how I like to frame this now. It's like what AI is doing is it's making things possible to exist that literally couldn't any other way. And you can have a gross feeling about that, but you can also see it as an opportunity. There's a lot of ideas out there that can't happen, and and here's the thing, your clients think they can't happen. You might realize, oh, actually they can. It's actually not that hard. When video generators came out, they were all pretty bad. And I think the other thing was that the early adopters of that stuff, they weren't professional filmmakers. They weren't like motion designers, professional video editors who have the taste and the experience to know what good is. But now those artists are starting to use this stuff, right? And so you got, what if Lord of the Rings was shot in 1950 on Panavision film? And I don't know like how this is useful, but I thought it was cool. Or like, what if Marshmallow was the star of an 80s sitcom? What would the intro look like? And none of this is real footage, zero, okay? And the two on the bottom are actually more interesting to me because they look like the kind of things that I used to have to do every single day as an editor, like weird clips and footage and lifestyle things. And like the skateboarding video is astounding to me, right? Because like those look like real shots and it's edited well. And if you go and find this and you watch it with music, it looks like a real spot, right? And it's cool because to me, this gives video editors superpowers. Like you turn into like literally like a superhero. So 2 years ago, I gave a talk at Half Res in Chicago, and this was right at the dawn of this stuff. And I was very unsure where AI was actually going to fit in. And I think this is the slide I would have shown there, like things that are useful to video editors, things that are useful to motion designers. AI is like, okay, it's a couple slivers maybe. So this is where I really think we're at now. If you're a video editor and you're not using any AI tools, I kind of think you're crazy at this point, to be honest, okay? Like built into Premiere, AI transcribes every clip you upload. And so you can then edit it like a Google Doc and it edits for you. It is so much faster than editing the other way, like in a timeline trying to listen to the audio, like 4 times as fast. Premiere is beta testing something now where like it's looking at your footage and logging it for you. I started my career as an assistant editor. That took days or weeks depending on the footage you have. And now it's doing that and transcribing it. It's like so much faster and you can edit way faster. And in Premiere, if like your clip isn't long enough, you can extend it and AI just like extends the clip for you. And now if you're using these generators, you want that shot that you want, it would fit perfectly right there, but it doesn't exist. You could hire a crew, go out and shoot it. Maybe if you're like, Brett from Deep Sky and you're super talented, you can go shoot the thing yourself. But like most people aren't that. What if I just prompt Google VO and I get 20 shots and I pick the best one and then I modify it a little bit and then I color correct it and I grade it and I crop it and I put it in and now I have the thing I want. It's a frickin' superpower. Now for motion designers, we're not there yet. And I think for motion design, it's probably, I'm not sure will ever be as useful for motion designers as it will for video editors, okay? Partially, that's because if you think about who owns YouTube, it's Google. And YouTube is like hundreds of billions of hours of video. How much motion design is there to actually train an AI model on? But these things are still very, 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 very useful, okay? So here's like, this was kind of an experiment I did, okay? So I went to one of those like stupid random idea generator sites and I was like, give me an idea, like for an ad. And it's like various grapes, all right? And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't know what that means. But I don't know, maybe like it's a wine label or it's a vineyard, it's a behind the scenes of a vineyard. I don't know, something to do with wine and grapes, okay? So in Midjourney, there's kind of a new feature where it's called mood board. And if you think about how you would approach this, if it was like a real job and you didn't have Midjourney or any of these things, well, you'd probably start with like a mood board, right? So you'd go out and you'd get on, Deep Sky's website, and you get on Buck's website, and you get on Oddfellow's website, and you'd go to Aero Costa's site, and you'd pull things you like, and you kind of look at it, and maybe you'd find some stock photos, and you put that together and show your client, okay? And you'd be like, this is kind of the art direction I'm thinking, and this is kind of the concept, right? So with Midjourney, what you can do is you can do that and let Midjourney look at it, and then you can prompt it. And I'll tell you what's cool about this, okay? So it's gonna give you a lot of garbage, okay? Nothing useful for production, okay? It just doesn't do that yet. But here's why this is cool to me. So these are like some images that it made that I thought were interesting. I wouldn't use these images to like produce a spot. What's cool about this is like the first thing I usually do when I have to think of an idea for anything is like I do mind mapping. Because my philosophy is the best idea is not the first one I think of. I have to dig and I gotta pull out all this like, debris to find like the nugget of something cool. This is a way to do that visually. So if you look at like that top left image with like the kind of bleach bypass photography and that red color, and it looks really stark, it almost feels like a documentary about crime or something. There's like kind of something dark about it. I never would have thought of that, right? I mean, maybe if I spent like a day on Pinterest and like really, really digging through, I would see something like that triggers an idea in my brain. Midjourney is really good at just doing that. It's just gonna throw crap at you, and like, if you look closely at any of it, it's not useful. But it's like, what about like, something leaking onto a newspaper? Well, I didn't have that idea. Now I do, and I don't like it. But I think, but that now makes me think, oh, maybe there's like some other way. And so to me, it's almost like using this like someone to bounce ideas off and just throw stuff at you. And that's really useful as a creative that has to look at reference on every single project and try to come up with some cool idea. And I don't think most people are thinking of Midjourney like this. They're thinking of it like it's gonna make the image for me. It's okay at that, like Garbage Pail Kids it can kind of do. It's actually pretty tricky to get it. But for this, it's really good. So this is an artist called Karen X. Chang, and she does these really cool viral kind of, loops and stuff, and she's really talented. And so she made this piece, and this used, like, you can't really tell where the AI was used here, I bet. And she obviously did a lot of this the old-fashioned way, right? She does stop motion and used After Effects and everything. Luckily, she put out a tutorial. And so she shows you, like, okay, she literally had to do all these like pictures and then scan them in and all that. But then there's this shot where she has to like extend a roof. Oh, I'll just use AI for that because I don't care what the roof looks like. Now I need an umbrella. Oh, great. Oh, I like the one in the middle. Oh, now I need it to turn into a kite. Oh, I need a red balloon. I don't like that red balloon. Here's 20 more. You pick the one you want. And so basically, the way I think of AI right now is it's like the best asset generator that's ever existed. And when we're animating stuff, typically we need assets to animate unless you're doing like, the mobile shapes thing, right? Which is still cool, still very popular. But when you need an element, you need an element. And where are you gonna get it? You're gonna get it from somewhere. And AI basically makes it almost instant, and you have way more control than you think. And I'll show you in a minute. I think eventually the video generators are gonna be useful for this too, right? So these are all AI generated. The flame and the smoke, that's from Google Theo 2, which I don't have access to yet. The one on the bottom is from Sora, so that's OpenAI's video generator. And I grew up in motion design in the era of like those inky mats, like where you drop ink in a tank or on something. I thought that was so cool. And I thought, oh, I wonder if I could just like make those whenever I want. And so what I did was I took a black frame and I took a frame of white ink that I generated in Midjourney and I threw it into Sora and I said, make this like 3-second clip. And it made this paint video for me. And it's kind of useless, except at the end of that, there's this interesting part like right now where if I took that and I crushed it and I used it as like a Lumimat in After Effects and maybe combined it with some other things, it's actually kind of cool. And I could have like had it give me 20 versions, but I didn't want to wait like all day because it takes a long time to do it. But I can imagine eventually saying, I want an inky mat that starts in the right corner and eventually spreads over 3 seconds to fill the frame. Do it. And it gives me 20 and I pick the one I like, right? That's really useful. That's so much faster than going out and trying to find that or shoot that. Now, one common critique of AI is that it's like a slot machine, right? It really is. It's like going to Vegas and you roll the dice, you're like, oh, what am I gonna get? So there's companies working on this right now. So this is a really cool one called Krea. So in Korea, you can actually just paint whatever you want, like some crude thing, and you give it a little prompt, like I need a grungy paper asset. I'm doing the eyeball thing from the early 2000s, and you just paint what you want, and then like almost in real time, it's like making an image for you. And when you're happy with it, you kind of like up-res it, and it adds more detail, and then you run it through like Magnific, which is an AI upscaler, and you have a 10K asset that's exactly the shape you want. That took 2 minutes. And if I sent that into Midjourney and I said make more of these, it would make variations for me. So that's really useful. That's way faster than think about how you would do this like the other way. You'd have to like literally cut the paper out and take a picture of it and then cut it out, or maybe you could find the right stock asset, or maybe there's like some pack you could buy, or you could make exactly the thing you want in 2 minutes, right? Now, I still had to want that. There's like a human being in that process somewhere saying, this is what I want, not that, right? And picking and choosing. And that's gonna be really important. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And in the end, I've already said this, but like without talent and taste, everything I just showed you is worthless, okay? It can't do it for you. This is my favorite example of that, and I know Rob, who's here, is gonna like this one. So this is behind the scenes of Hotel Transylvania, okay? A lot of these AI generators are capable of making things that approximate 3D character animation, okay? But this is like, to me, kind of the pinnacle of it, okay? So the movie is cool, it's funny, it's cute. The character animation is maybe the best I've ever seen. And that's because it's directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, who's like maybe the best living 3D character animator. And what's crazy, I know you're like, what is happening? So what's happening is the animators on this film are amazing, right? And they're using character rigs, and they're making the poses as crazy as they possibly can, but they're rigs, right? So they break, they don't do certain things, and then the director Genndy, he draws over them and says, no. I want more extreme poses. And they're like, Genndy, it doesn't do that. And he's like, figure it out. And so they basically had to go frame by frame and rig the character and then sculpt it to fit the director's drawings. And the crazy thing is when you watch this movie, it has the most extreme posing I've ever seen on 3D animation. It's ridiculous. So if you like didn't know this, like go watch it again. It's worth it. How does an AI do that, right? How does it think to do that? And I think, like this, now we're getting philosophical, but like conceptually, what AI is doing now makes a lot of sense to me. It seems like, okay, now that I understand how AI works, yeah, sure, it can do those things. I don't see how it can do this, right? To have the taste and the idea and the point of view that Genndy Tartakovsky has, it is gonna be able to make character animation that is like 10% as good as this, maybe, but to actually be this artistic with it, I don't see that that's coming anytime soon, right? All right, so let's address the elephant in the room here, okay? So this is the icky part. So like a lot of people I'm sure in this room probably still feel pretty icky about AI. And it's not just because like, it's a little scary, it may take jobs and stuff like that. I think it's because of how these models were trained, okay? Am I on to something? Am I close? Okay. And the fact of the matter is, all of them, except I think Adobe Firefly might be the exception, were trained on images that they did not get permission to train on and videos they didn't get permission for and they didn't pay anybody, okay? Which might be illegal. We don't know yet. The Supreme Court will figure it out one day, and then we'll know. And so the way I describe it is like there's this big gray rain cloud kind of over the whole thing. It's like super cool, and look at all these opportunities. And I really think like you can work way faster if you're using these tools, like absolutely. But there's this like big thing that might rain on everybody, and it kind of sucks. And I kind of don't want to think about it, but it's still there. And so if I was going to address the philosophical, ethical kind of qualms about that, I think that's a completely different talk. But I'm trying to be practical in this talk, okay? And so let's talk about practically what do we do about that rain cloud. So there's two options. You say, I don't like the rain cloud, I'm staying away from this. Or you say, I hate the rain cloud, what choice do I have? And I think it's a bitter pill, to be honest. Like, I don't like it either, but I've seen this movie before, okay? CG felt a lot like this. Like a lot of Disney animators did not like CG when it came out. The ones that adapted and got on board, like Glenn Keane, are still doing great. The ones that didn't, like a lot of them left the industry, right? Because they didn't want to adapt. And I understand that. And like, I respect it, honestly, in a way. But that's reality. So I just wanted to say that out loud, that rain cloud sucks. I'm not sure what to do about it, to be honest. But I do know what's going to happen, or I suspect very strongly what's going to happen in the next 10 years as younger artists grow up where AI has just always existed. They're not going to care about the rain cloud. They're going to use it. They're going to be really good at it, right? But they're not going to have the experience and the taste that you get from decades in this industry. And so if you think of AI as a tool with an asterisk kind of hanging out there that might rain on us, it can be super useful and really like accelerate a lot of the things that you can do. And as I keep coming back to, make things possible that weren't before. So what does this mean, like kind of overall broadly? So when I started my career, it was literally enough to know software. That was it. You were fine. I knew After Effects. There was like 5 other dudes in Boston that knew it. Like I got plenty of work, as much as I wanted. I didn't matter that I didn't know how to animate. I sucked at design. Couldn't care less. Okay. And eventually, I think really because After Effects displaced a lot of more expensive things, it was more accessible, and then there started to be this ecosystem around it. All of a sudden, you actually needed a little artistic skill too, right, to really be dangerous. And so I think that's basically still where we are. But if I project out and I say, okay, well, AI, I don't know how useful it's going to be with animation. Like that remains to be seen. But with design, it's really accelerating things. And it does, I can't draw those Garbage Pail Kids cards, okay? So like, but they look pretty good if you look at them. So like artistic skill, unfortunately, gets easier, right? The bar lowers there because as long as you have some decent taste and a good idea, you can probably get something that your client's going to be okay with. And so what does this mean like in that world, right? The post-AI world. It's this, okay? We're at the point where when, maybe not there yet, but when AI gets really, really good, your ideas are going to be the thing that separate you. Like, I got an idea. I'm going to make real-time digital puppets. And that way we can make like a YouTube series, which would be like prohibitively expensive if we had to fabricate the things, but now it's possible. You have to have that idea. You have to be that creative. And so I think those are kind of the skills I would encourage everyone to really cultivate and think about. I think there's certain types of design that it would be very difficult for AI to displace. But there's certain things that you probably already see that you're like, oh, it's pretty good at that. And if you want to get on board with that, you're going to move really, really quickly. But it's going to be all about ideas. What are you actually trying to say, right? Sometimes on behalf of your client, sometimes it's your idea. But you have to have something interesting to say or these tools are completely useless. And then client service is kind of the thing that like, even when AI is running everything and we all have personalized robots, client service is still going to be like the most important thing. And I think anyone who's ever run any kind of business knows that, okay? And I think that's just kind of evergreen. That's human nature. As long as there's humans, client service will be like, the gold star. All right, so we're going to start landing the plane here. I hope no one's overwhelmed. My goal with this talk was to sort of show you these opportunities that are out there. Because to me, all 3 of these represent enormous opportunities for artists. If you think about real-time 3D and sort of that revolution, which is happening in slow motion, like that opens up crazy possibilities that a lot of your clients don't know exist yet. Rive, my beloved, really. The thing about Rive is like, if you could like zoom out and look at the size of like the sort of traditional motion design industry, it's pretty big. But if you could zoom out and look at the size of the industry that could use Rive and use like animation in apps and websites and live things, that like data dashboards, human machine interface, displays in cars, way bigger. And the best people on earth, the most capable people of taking advantage of that is motion designers. Like you have all the skills. You have to learn like one new thing and you've got it. Okay, I'm serious. And then AI is a little more like vague. I'm not quite really sure like how, like I've already shown you like it can be very useful, like even for things you do every day, like making mood boards or like designing assets that you need to then put in a thing and animate. It's really good at that now. I'm not really sure what else it's going to be really good at for animation, but even if it only ever is the best stock asset generator that's ever been created for motion designers, that's still pretty good. And the artists that get good at doing that and making assets really fast and coming up with ideas faster, like you can use ChatGPT voice mode and it will talk to you and you can tell it you are a creative director and you're kind of a jerk, but we're going to bounce ideas off each other and it will literally like throw stuff at you. And most of it's bad, but it may say something bad that triggers a good idea in your head, right? These are like superpowers and most artists aren't doing it yet. And so I kind of wanted to throw that out and just see what happens. But you don't need to like instantly dive onto all 3 of these and try to learn all of them. Okay, so that's not what I'm saying. I think whatever of these 3 kind of appealed to you the most, maybe just like start digging into that a little bit. As I mentioned in the earlier part of the talk, all these things happen in slow motion, right? They don't happen quickly. They always take years. I just assumed by now, like when I saw Rive, I was like, it's gonna take 2 years. No, it's gonna take longer. It just does, right? But I'll tell you what won't work. This ain't gonna work. I've seen this before, right? It doesn't end well. So let's talk once more about Jevons paradox, right? So all 3 of these things, I guess if you're using like economic terms, they're deflationary, right? Because they take something that was like time consuming or expensive to produce, and they make it less so. And every single time this happens, there's way more. So the term Jevons paradox comes from this guy Jevons in 1865. And he was talking about steam engines and coal, okay? And he noticed that, it took a lot of coal to run steam engines. And then all of a sudden the steam engines got better through technology where it took way less coal. And the coal manufacturers were freaked out because, oh no, they're gonna buy less coal. Well, guess what actually happened? Because the trains were cheaper to run, there were way more trains. Way more people wanted to take them. And so they needed way more coal. Everyone benefited, right? And I mean, there's like a million boring examples of this, right? If you think about, Dropbox, right? Companies used to have paper files, right? Literally like a filing cabinet. You ever seen one of those? And now hard drive space is basically free, right? $10 a month on Dropbox, you get, 20 terabytes. And so now there's digital documents. Are there more documents or less documents now than there were when it was paper, right? Way, way more. And HVAC systems and public transportation. I mean, there's all these different examples of this where it's someone gets freaked out because their thing is now easier. And what happens is people want 100 times the amount of their thing. I really think that's going to happen with all three of these. I think as 3D animation gets easier, and we've already kind of seen this with CG, people want way more of it. As animation that's interactive on websites and apps gets easier, people are going to want more of it. And as making assets that you can animate and getting ideas, as that becomes easier, people are going to want more of it. It's just it's going to keep doing this, is my prediction. Okay. So right now, the last 2 years were tough for a lot of people. Okay, we kind of want to just pretend they didn't happen. But right now, almost everyone I talk to is either doing well or cautiously optimistic. And there's a lot of kind of leading indicators, right? And it's weird because I always say, I don't know if School of Motion is a leading or a lagging indicator for the motion design industry. We're doing very well this year, for whatever that's worth. And so I think this trend's going to continue up and to the right. I think we might actually be at the beginning of a wave that's starting. Because I've seen this before, like I said, every time there's a new technology and it's scary at first and everyone's trying to figure it out, and then finally it locks in, boom. And the people that benefit the most are the ones that get on the wave early, okay? So if any of this was appealing to you, I highly recommend, maybe taking a class in these things. I know a guy, right? But really what I would recommend is just experiment with these things. Just know they're possible so that when you spot an opportunity, you're I know the thing that can do that. And you can just learn it really quick, right? And there's this cool saying that I've heard where, basically luck is sort of it's the combination of your surface area and these random opportunities. And the more surface area that you're taking up, the more lucky you're gonna feel, right? It's like having, one fishing rod versus 20 fishing rods, right? The odds are the same for each fishing rod, but if you have 20 of them, you're luckier. Hey, look at that. And I think that being aware is kind of the motion design version of that. Knowing that this is possible, maybe dabbling in Rive or Unreal or trying out Midjourney a little bit, and then just know it. Just know that that's a thing, and you're gonna spot an opportunity in the next 5 years. I guarantee it, okay? And then the next part is you have to tell your clients that this stuff is possible. And those of you that are comfortable doing that, I think are gonna kill it, okay? I think that there's a lot of companies out there that aren't gonna, you by the virtue of the fact that you're here, you've kind of opted into a room filled with ambitious people that are engaged, right? And so I think you're already more informed than most motion designers probably. And then the clients, they don't actually know that this stuff is possible, and you can teach them that. And you could have a giant business based on that, okay? So a little risk taking is probably a good time to do it. So all of these tools, they're weapons against budget and deadline. We're gonna say goodbye to them. And I hope that you guys are feeling Futurey. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I hope I said something worthwhile. Thank you guys. There's a Q&A. And feel free to come up after and ask me questions, talk to me. I love meeting everybody. Thank you.